Thank you. And let me begin by thanking all of you for being here this evening. This is a beautiful crowd, and from up here, let me tell you, you're looking very beautiful to me. We have the most important midterm election in the modern history of this country coming in 2 weeks. And we need, from coast to coast, to elect strong, progressive governors. And I know that in the next 2 weeks, each of you is going to do everything you can to make sure that David Garcia is the next governor of Arizona. Let me be very straightforward with you. Let me just tell you that you live in a nation today which sadly has a corrupt political system. It is a nation which has more income and wealth inequality than almost any other major country on earth. And the only antidote to taking on billionaires who buy elections, because as we speak right now, you got a handful of billionaires, people like the Koch brothers and others. They are spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get candidates elected who will represent their interests, the interests of the wealthy and the powerful. So when you turn on a TV tonight, you see some ugly 30-second ad, try to figure out who is paying for that ad and why. And the people who are paying for that ad could care less about the environment, could care less about human rights. They want tax breaks for billionaires, and that is why they pay for those ads. And the only antidote I know is to how you take on wealthy and powerful and greedy people who care only about their own interest. The only way I know is when people organize at the grassroots level and stand up and fight back. And in many ways, Arizona has begun that process. When I was back here in 2016, you had a Maricopa County sheriff who was a racist. That's right. He was a racist of the worst kind. But you know what you did? You stood up, you fought back, and you defeated him. In 2016, and I remember this very well, and I'll tell you a story. I was here a couple of months ago in Phoenix, and I saw a woman. I stayed at a hotel, and a woman came up to me, and she said, "Senator, when you were on the ballot here in Arizona in 2016, I waited online 8 hours in order to vote for you." People had to wait 8 hours, give up a day's pay, not have time to spend with their kids, and God knows how many thousands of people simply did not vote. But you stood up and you said that you will not allow people to suppress democracy, and you got rid of that county recorder. And that's what standing up and fighting back is about. Somebody wants to suppress democracy, prevent people from voting, you said you're out the door. And you did something else recently, and I applaud you for this. You stood up and said that if somebody in Arizona works 40 hours a week, that person should not be forced to live in abysmal poverty. and with groups like Lucha leading the way. You raise the minimum wage. And that's what happens when people stand together and fight back. Now here we are, 2 weeks before an election. Let me give you a brief analysis of American politics today. 4 years ago, in the last midterm elections, the United States had the lowest voter turnout of any midterm elections since World War II. 2 out of 3 Americans did not go to the polls. And here in Arizona, that was exactly what happened. 2 out of 3 people did not vote. Working people did not vote, low-income people did not vote, and young people did not vote in large numbers. And the result of that all across this country is when billionaires spend hundreds of millions of dollars and ordinary people don't vote, Republicans win and win big, and that is what happened in 2014. And you saw the results of that here in Arizona and all across this country. In 2014, we had the lowest voter turnout in modern history. In 2018, we have got to have the highest voter turnout. Now, I'm delighted that all of you are here, and I know that you're going to vote or have already voted for David. But in these dangerous and unprecedented times, you got to do more than just cast your ballot. You know what you got to do? You got to go and get your friends and your family and your co-workers and get them to vote as well. We've got about 1,000 people here tonight. That's a great turnout. If each of you can bring out 3 additional people, that 1,000 votes for David suddenly becomes 4,000 votes. Let's do that. And I say that because I want all of you to think, and I don't mean to be ultra patriotic right now, but we live at a moment, not only here in Arizona, but all across this country, where right-wing, cowardly Republicans are trying to suppress the vote. You see, these people don't have the guts to defend their ideas. They don't have the guts to go before their constituents and say, these are my ideas, vote for me. They know that because they represent the wealthy and the powerful, if there was an open election and everybody was able to vote, they would lose. So what they do, whether it is Georgia, whether it is North Dakota, wherever it is, they're trying to suppress the vote. And I want all of you to remember, the men and women throughout the history of the United States who have put their lives on the line to defend democracy. So when you talk to a friend and that friend says, well, I'm kind of busy, I got other things to do, it doesn't matter. You remind them of those people who died for America's way of life. And the essence of America's way of life is that ordinary people, not kings, not billionaires, not czars, you, ordinary Americans, control the future of our country. And that means we have got to get out and vote. And I would just remind you this. In this country today, younger people vote historically in substantially lower numbers than does the general population. If we accomplish nothing more in this campaign than that people under 30 voted at the same percentage as people over 30, we would transform Arizona and transform America. Let's do it. Now, I recognize that in 2016, Trump won the state of Arizona. But I think that many people in Arizona who voted for Trump did not know then what they know now, and that is that Trump is a pathological liar, and that you can never believe anything that he says. All of you will remember that when Trump came to Arizona or Vermont or wherever he went, he said, I am going to provide health care for everybody. That is what he said, but he lied. Because as president, what he did is help lead the effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would have thrown 32 million Americans off of the health care that they have. And if it wasn't for the vote of your late Senator John McCain, that is what would have happened. Trump said that when he ran for office, that if he was elected, he was going to take on the pharmaceutical industry, which charges us by far the highest prices in the world for the medicine that we need. He lied again. In the last 2 years, the cost of prescription drugs has soared. Trump told the people of Arizona that if he was elected, he would not cut Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. He lied again. His last budget called for $1 trillion cut in Medicaid, $500 billion in Medicare, and $72 billion in the Social Security Trust Fund. Trump said that he was going to take on the establishment. Well, he appointed more billionaires to his administration than any president in the history of this country. Trump said he was going to take on Wall Street, but he deregulated many Wall Street banks. In other words, Trump told the people of Arizona one thing, and he ended up doing something very, very different. But it's not just his economic policies that bother me. Trump pretends to be a really tough guy. He is so tough that he is prepared to see agents rip little babies out of the arms of their mothers. That's how tough he is. But when standing up to Vladimir Putin, suddenly Mr. Trump is not so tough. Trump is very tough when it comes to mocking and insulting women, including women who have been victims of sexual assault. But somehow he is not so tough in standing up to the dictatorship in Saudi Arabia that kills a dissident journalist. And frankly, I am a little bit tired, and I think you are as well, of having a president of the United States making insults against our democratic allies all over the world, but then coddling and befriending dictators from one end of this world to the other. And in 2018, the American people are going to remind Mr. Trump that our job as Americans is to spread democracy and human rights all over this world and not coddle dictators and tyrants and murderers. Our struggle in this election is not just about Trump. It's not just about taking on the most dangerous and dishonest president in American history. Our job is to bring forth a vision for the future of Arizona and the future of America, a vision that works for all of us, not just the few. Instead of living in a nation in which the three wealthiest people today own more wealth than the bottom half of the American people. Living in a nation in where the top 1/10 of 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. A nation in which the top 1% are earning more than 40% of all new income being created. Our job together is to create an economy and a government that work for all of us, not just the people on top. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all of the people in Arizona who supported my 2016 candidacy. Thank you. Out of that campaign, in that campaign, we won 22 states. We won over 13 million votes. And we won more votes from young people than Clinton and Trump combined. And because of that support here in Arizona and around the country, ideas that we campaigned on that just 3 years ago seemed to be radical and extreme are now part of mainstream conversation and in fact are being supported by candidates all across America. Today, whether you are a conservative or a progressive, you know that we have a corrupt campaign finance system and that we have got to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. You know that we have got to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, and that we need pay equity for women. It is not acceptable that women today earn 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. And while we're talking about women's issues, let us make it clear that it is a woman and not the government who has the right to control her own body. Now, 3 years ago, I made a statement that at that point seemed radical, ain't radical today. And that statement is that health care is a right, not a privilege. Now, today in America, we have 30 million people who have no health insurance. We have even more people who are underinsured. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, such that 1 out of 5 Americans can't even afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. And at the end of all of that, and you got to know this, we end up spending almost twice as much per person on health care as do the people of any other nation. We are wasting hundreds of billions of dollars a year on bureaucracy and on billing. And that is why, just today, another poll came out showing that 70% of the American people now support a Medicare for all single-payer program. We will not continue to be the only major country not to guarantee health care to all. And I want all of you to know that when you get sick, you go to the doctor when you need to go. When you go to the hospital, you don't have to worry about financial ruin. That when a doctor prescribes a drug, you can afford to fill that prescription. This is not a radical idea. It is an idea now supported by 70% of the American people. And together we're going to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies and remind them that the function of health care is to provide quality care to all, not to make billions in profits for insurance companies and drug companies. Now, Trump lies about a lot of things, and just last week or 2 weeks ago, he made another major lie, and he said, you know, in terms of climate change, we're just not sure. There are differences of opinion about climate change out there. That's a lie. The truth is that 99% of the scientists who study climate have concluded that climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity, and climate change is already causing devastating problems in the United States and around the world. And I don't know if some of you happen to have read about a report that recently came out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Anybody see that? This is what it said, and this should get you really, really nervous. It said that we have 12 years, not a long period of time, to substantially cut the amount of carbon in our atmosphere, or else this planet will suffer irreparable harm. Our job right now, for your sake, for the sake of your kids and your grandchildren, is to tell Trump and the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our planet. And we're making some progress, not enough, some progress on the issue of criminal justice. Because we have today a criminal justice system that is not only broken, it is a racist system. And more Americans understand, among other things, that the so-called war on drugs has been an abysmal failure. Too many people have seen their lives negatively impacted by arrest records for possession of marijuana. We have an absurd situation in Washington where, if you can believe it, under the Federal Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is at the same level as is heroin. And all over this country, and I guess you came pretty close recently, but all over this country, states are going forward either decriminalizing the possession of marijuana or making it legal. Let's do that. I do not want to see lives destroyed where people get police records for the possession of marijuana. They can't get a job, can't get an apartment. That's wrong. We have got to deal also with an issue that I know is very important to this state, and that is we have got to stand up to Trump's attacks against the immigrant community. And for me, this is a little bit personal because my dad came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket and with very little education. Our job is not to demonize immigrants. Our job is not to threaten people in the DACA program. Our job together is to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. Now, I strongly disagree with Trump on his economic policies, on his disrespect for science, on his views on immigration. But I'll tell you what gets to me even deeper, and that is the following. Throughout the modern history of this country, we have had presidents, whether they were conservative or whether they were liberal, who understood that the function of a president is to bring people together, not divide them up. Now, everybody in this room knows the history of the United States and the wonderful and great things that we have done, but the not so great things that have happened in our country. You are all aware of the abominations committed against the Native American people by the settlers. You all know that. You know the horrors of slavery and racism and segregation. You know that 100 years ago today, women did not have the right to vote. They were second-class citizens. You know that our gay brothers and sisters had to hide their sexuality. You know that throughout America, there were all kinds of discriminatory actions against Asians, against Italians, Catholics, Irish, Jews, you name it. That's the bad news. But the good news that we should be very proud of is that during all of that time, with all of that racism and sexism and homophobia, during all of that time, there were good people who stood up, often at great personal sacrifice, who said that we will not tolerate racism in America, that we will not tolerate sexism in America, that we will not tolerate religious bigotry, that we will not tolerate homophobia. And many of these people stood up. Some of them went to jail, some of them were killed. But they stood up for what America is supposed to be about. And that is a nation that treats all people with respect. And now for the first time, we have a president who is trying to divide us up, trying to say that we should worry about somebody because the color of their skin may be dark, or maybe they came from another country, or maybe they are Muslim, or maybe there's some other religion. We're supposed to hate them. And what we say to Trump is that this country has struggled for too many years with discrimination. We are not going backwards, we are going forwards. We're going to bring our people together. So this election in 2 weeks is enormously important for so many reasons. It's important that we will tell the world that we do not accept Trump's demagoguery and his prejudices and his economic policies. It is important that we tell the world and our own people that we want a government that works for all of us and not just the few. In 2 weeks, you in Arizona can help make American history. Give us a strong, progressive governor here. Please elect David Garcia as your next governor. Thank you all very much.